Most people think they understand love, but what I'm about to tell you will completely disrupt that belief. Because the truth is, the deepest love a woman can experience does not look the way movies, social media, or even her past relationships have taught her to expect. It is quieter, it is slower, and that is exactly why most people miss it. If you've ever wondered why some women suddenly change, become calmer, more selective, and emotionally unavailable to chaos, this is not coincidence. Something profound has happened internally, and once you understand it, you will never look at relationships the same way again. Here is what no one explains honestly. When a woman encounters a connection that brings emotional safety instead of emotional confusion, her entire psychology begins to reorganize. Her nervous system responds before her mind can explain it. She feels less reactive, less desperate, less compelled to chase or prove her worth, and that shift scares people because it cannot be manipulated, it cannot be rushed, it cannot be undone. This is not about age. It is about emotional maturity, presence, and psychological leadership. And the reason this topic makes people uncomfortable is because it exposes a truth many don't want to face. Chaos was never passion, and peace was never boring. We were simply conditioned to confuse intensity with love. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you are going to understand why some women stop tolerating mixed signals, why they walk away without drama, and why they never go back to the relationships that once consumed them. You will see how emotional safety rewires attraction, why growth replaces chasing, and how self-discovery becomes inevitable when love is grounded in reality rather than fantasy. This is not content designed to entertain you for a moment. This is insight that will challenge how you choose, how you attach, and how you love. And once you hear it, you won't be able to unhear it. When a woman is deeply in love with an older man, the first visible shift is not excitement, not drama, not obsession. It is peace, and peace is not passive. Peace is a psychological signal. It is the nervous system recognizing safety. It is the mind no longer operating in survival mode. It is the body finally exhaling after years of holding tension it did not even know it was carrying. Most people misunderstand this. They assume love should feel intense, overwhelming, almost chaotic. They confuse emotional volatility with passion. But what actually happens when a woman encounters a man who is emotionally grounded, experienced, and regulated is that her internal world begins to reorganize itself. Her thoughts slow down, her reactions soften, her emotions stop swinging between extremes. Not because she has become less emotional, but because she no longer needs to be on guard. Around emotional immaturity, a woman stays alert. She reads tone, analyzes silence, anticipates disappointment. Her mind is constantly scanning for danger. This state can feel exciting at first because adrenaline often disguises itself as attraction. But it is exhausting, and over time, it drains her sense of self. When she connects with an older man who has already faced life, processed his failures, and understands emotional responsibility, something very different happens. He does not provoke her insecurity. He does not create confusion and call it mystery. He does not withhold consistency and label it independence. His stability gives her permission to rest, and rest is where clarity begins. She no longer feels the urge to prove herself. She does not perform, she does not compete, she does not try to earn affection through emotional labor. Instead, she observes, she listens, she feels. Her attachment becomes quieter but deeper. This quietness is often mistaken for disinterest by people who equate love with noise. But silence, when it is safe, is not emptiness, it is presence. Psychologically, this is significant. A regulated partner helps regulate you. Emotional containment allows the brain to shift from anxiety-driven responses to reflective thinking. She becomes less reactive and more responsive, less impulsive and more intentional. Her decisions are no longer shaped by fear of loss, but by alignment with her values. This is why her life begins to slow down. She stops oversharing. She stops explaining herself to people who misunderstand her. She stops chasing environments that reward chaos. She becomes selective with her energy because peace has taught her its value. Once the nervous system learns calm, it resists returning to disorder. An older man does not rush her emotions. He does not demand intensity to feel validated. He allows connection to develop at a natural pace. And in that space, she begins to trust herself more. Her intuition sharpens, her boundaries strengthen. She does not confuse availability with intimacy anymore. This shift is often subtle, but it is profound. Her conversations change. She asks deeper questions, not interrogative questions, but reflective ones, questions about purpose, values, future vision. She is no longer interested in potential alone. She wants proof of character. She wants emotional consistency. She wants to know how someone handles pressure, not just pleasure. And because peace removes urgency, she stops settling. She no longer feels the pressure to make something work at any cost. She understands that love should add to her life, not destabilize it. The calm she experiences becomes her baseline, and anything that disrupts it feels immediately wrong. This is why people around her might say she has changed. They may say she has become distant, reserved, too serious. What they actually witness NG is emotional maturity. She has stopped outsourcing her emotional regulation to unstable dynamics. She has learned that calm is not boring, calm is clarity, and clarity is powerful. Peace allows her to see patterns she once ignored. Red flags that once felt normal now stand out clearly. She notices tone shifts. She notices inconsistencies. She notices emotional avoidance. And instead of reacting emotionally, she responds with distance. This is not coldness. This is self-respect. The presence of an emotionally grounded man teaches her something fundamental. Love does not require anxiety. Connection does not require confusion. Attraction does not require emotional instability. What she feels is not the absence of passion, but the presence of safety, and safety changes everything. A woman who feels safe does not seek validation externally. She does not compete with other women. She does not overextend herself to be chosen. She understands that being chosen by someone unstable is not a prize. Peace recalibrates her standards. She begins to value reliability over excitement, predictability over unpredictability. Not because she fears risk, but because she understands sustainability. She realizes that love is not about constant stimulation, but consistent support. This kind of peace is not given, it is cultivated. And once experienced, it becomes non-negotiable. That is why this shift is irreversible. Once a woman's nervous system experiences calm connection, she cannot unlearn it. She cannot romanticize chaos the same way again. She cannot confuse intensity with intimacy anymore. Her body remembers what safety feels like. And here is the truth many are not ready to hear. Peace is not what happens after love. Peace is how real love reveals itself. If a connection brings calm instead of confusion, clarity instead of chaos, and grounding instead of anxiety, pay attention. Because peace is not the absence of passion, it is the presence of emotional truth. After peace settles in, something even more important begins to happen. Growth replaces chasing. And this is where the dynamic truly separates itself from everything she has known before. When a woman is deeply in love with an older man, she does not feel the urge to pursue, convince, or perform. There is no hunger to be constantly seen or validated. Instead, there is a quiet, internal shift towards self-development. She begins to grow, not because she is asked to, but because she feels inspired to. Chasing is always a symptom of insecurity. It emerges when attention feels unstable, when affection feels conditional, when connection feels like it could disappear at any moment. In those environments, a woman spends her emotional energy trying to secure her place. She overthinks, she overgives, she adapts herself to remain relevant. That is not love, that is survival. With an emotionally mature man, that survival instinct switches off. His consistency communicates safety, his presence communicates certainty, and certainty allows her to redirect her energy inward. Instead of asking, "How do I keep him?" she begins asking, "Who am I becoming in this connection?" That is a profound psychological shift. She starts paying attention to her habits, her mindset, her emotional patterns. She notices where she reacts impulsively, where she avoids discomfort, where she carries unresolved wounds. Not because he points them out, but because being with someone stable exposes instability within oneself. Calm becomes a mirror. This is why growth happens naturally. She becomes more emotionally articulate. She learns to express needs clearly instead of expecting them to be guessed. She stops using silence as punishment and starts using communication as connection. Her emotional intelligence expands because she is no longer overwhelmed by emotional noise. An older man does not rush her into transformation. He does not criticize her into becoming better. He models steadiness. He models accountability. He models restraint. And humans learn more from observation than instruction. His way of being invites her to elevate her own. She begins to refine her standards, not in a rigid or arrogant way, but in a grounded one. She becomes aware of what aligns with her values and what does not. She is no longer impressed by surface-level charm or grand gestures that lack follow-through. She looks for coherence between words and actions. This discernment is growth. And this is where many people misinterpret her again. They assume she is becoming less emotional, less affectionate, less available. What is actually happening is that she is becoming more intentional. She is no longer giving unlimited access to her emotional world. She understands that intimacy must be earned through consistency. Growth also shows up in her self-discipline. She becomes more structured, more organized, more deliberate with her time, because when you are with someone who values direction, you become aware of your own direction. She starts thinking long-term about her career, her purpose, her personal development. She stops romanticizing instability and starts building sustainability. This is not about dependency. In fact, it is the opposite. She becomes more independent emotionally. She does not rely on constant reassurance. She does not collapse when there is distance. She trusts the connection because it has been proven, not promised. That trust frees her to focus on becoming her best self. Growth also means accountability. She stops blaming others for her emotional triggers. She becomes curious about her reactions instead of defensive. She asks herself difficult questions. Why does this bother me? What is this teaching me? What pattern is repeating here? Emotional maturity begins with self-inquiry, not self-justification. Being with someone experienced accelerates this process because immaturity becomes obvious in the presence of stability. You can no longer hide behind Rama when calm exists. You can no longer excuse inconsistency when reliability is available. Growth becomes the only logical response. She also becomes less performative. She no longer curates herself for approval. She shows up as she is, honest, vulnerable, human. And instead of that vulnerability being exploited, it is respected. That experience alone rewires her understanding of intimacy. She learns that she does not have to earn love by shrinking, pleasing, or overextending. She learns that growth does not mean becoming someone else. It means becoming more aligned with who she already is. And here is a critical point. She grows because she is not being chased or chased after. She is being met. Meeting creates equality. Chasing creates imbalance. In imbalance, one person grows resentful while the other grows complacent. In mutual presence, both evolve. That is why this dynamic feels different. It is not built on emotional hunger. It is built on emotional sufficiency. She also becomes more patient, not passive, but patient. She understands timing. She understands that meaningful things take time to build. She no longer forces outcomes. She allows processes to unfold. That patience spills into other areas of her life. She stops rushing success. She stops comparing her journey to others. She stays focused. This kind of growth is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it is visible in her posture, her speech, her decisions. She carries herself differently. She responds instead of reacts. She chooses instead of settles. And perhaps the most important shift is this. She grows because she is not afraid of losing him, not because she does not care, but because she trusts herself enough to walk away from anything that disrupts her growth. That is real confidence. That is emotional adulthood. When a woman grows instead of chases, she reclaims her power. She becomes the source of her own stability, and that changes the entire quality of her relationships. Growth is not something that happens after love. Growth is what real love invites. And if a connection encourages you to evolve instead of perform, to reflect instead of react, and to build instead of chase, then you are not losing yourself in love. You are finding yourself through it. As growth takes root, something else shifts quietly but unmistakably. Her standards rise, not in a superficial way, not as a list of demands or unrealistic expectations, but as an internal calibration. When a woman is deeply in love with an older man who embodies emotional maturity, she does not become more rigid. She becomes more precise. She stops negotiating with what does not align. She stops explaining why certain behaviors hurt her. She stops tolerating what she once excused. This is not arrogance. This is clarity. Standards rise when confusion leaves. When peace and growth become familiar, chaos feels intrusive. She begins to recognize that what she once called patience was often self-betrayal. What she once called flexibility was sometimes fear of being alone. Emotional maturity teaches her that love does not require endurance of discomfort to be real. An older, emotionally grounded man does not normalize inconsistency. He does not dismiss her concerns. He does not minimize emotional responsibility. His behavior sets a reference point, and once a reference point exists, everything else is measured against it. This is where her tolerance changes. She becomes less tolerant of emotional games. Hot and cold behavior no longer feels exciting. It feels immature. Ambiguity no longer feels romantic. It feels lazy. She does not feel the need to decode mixed signals because clarity has become her standard. Psychologically, this is a major shift. The brain adapts to consistency. Once it experiences reliability, unpredictability triggers discomfort rather than attraction. Her nervous system has learned the difference between chemistry and compatibility, so she stops rationalizing red flags. She no longer explains away disrespect as misunderstanding. She no longer frames neglect as independence. She no longer confuses potential with effort. Her mind has reorganized its priorities. Consistency, integrity, and emotional availability move to the top. And this is where people often say she's become too much, too demanding, too selective, too hard to please. What they are really saying is that she no longer accepts less. Her standards rise because she understands her worth, not in an abstract sense, but in a lived one. She has experienced what it feels like to be valued without having to fight for it. That experience recalibrates everything. She begins to notice how people handle responsibility, how they manage stress, how they respond when things do not go their way. Character becomes more attractive than charisma. Emotional stability becomes more attractive than charm. She also becomes deeply aware of reciprocity. She gives fully, but only where effort is mutual. She invests where there is follow-through. She does not overextend herself to compensate for someone else's lack of presence. This is not withholding, this is discernment. Her emotional generosity becomes intentional. And here is an important distinction. Raised standards do not mean emotional walls, they mean emotional gates. She is still open, still warm, still capable of deep love, but access is earned through consistency, not words. This changes how she dates, how she relates, how she commits. She no longer confuses attraction with alignment. She understands that desire without respect is unsustainable. She understands that chemistry without values eventually collapses. Her standards are no longer driven by fantasy, but by reality. This is why her relationships become fewer but deeper. She does not entertain multiple options to feel secure. She feels secure within herself. She does not need attention to feel chosen. She needs integrity to feel connected. And because As her standards rise internally, she does not need to announce them externally. She does not threaten to leave, she leaves. She does not demand change. She chooses differently. She does not argue to be understood. She aligns with those who already do. This is emotional power. Being with an older man who has already learned these lessons accelerates her understanding. He does not resist her standards because he respects them. He does not feel challenged by her boundaries because he has his own. Mutual respect replaces power struggles. She realizes that love does not require tolerance of behavior that erodes self-respect. She realizes that compromise is not the same as sacrifice. She realizes that standards are not barriers to love, they are filters for it. Her sense of self-worth becomes embodied. She no longer asks, "Am I asking for too much?" She asks, "Is this aligned with who I am becoming?" That question changes everything. Raised standards also mean she becomes honest with herself. She stops pretending she is okay when she is not. She stops staying where she feels unseen. She stops investing in connections that require her to abandon her intuition. Her inner dialogue becomes firm but compassionate. She trusts herself, and trust in oneself is the foundation of healthy relationships. This is why she becomes less reactive. She does not engage in unnecessary conflict. She does not try to control outcomes. She understands that people reveal who they are through behavior, not promises. She observes, decides, and moves accordingly. Her standards rise because she has learned that peace is fragile. It must be protected, and anything that consistently disrupts it does not belong in her life. This does not make her rigid. It makes her grounded. She understands flexibility within alignment. She understands compromise without self-erasure. She understands love without losing dignity. And here is the truth that often unsettles people. When a woman's standards rise, she does not become harder to love. She becomes impossible to manipulate. She no longer stays in situations that rely on her silence. She no longer accepts affection that comes with conditions. She no longer confuses endurance with devotion. Her standards are no longer about what she wants from someone else. They are about what she requires from herself, to honor her time, to respect her energy, to protect her emotional health. This is why she appears calm, composed, and selective. She is not waiting to be chosen. She is choosing, and that is the highest form of self-respect. If your standards rise when you fall in love, not your anxiety, not your self-doubt, not your tolerance for pain, then you are not becoming difficult. You are becoming aligned. And alignment is what turns love into something sustainable, not something you have to survive. After peace has settled, after growth has replaced chasing, and after standards have risen, something deeply transformative happens. She does not disappear into the relationship, she discovers herself within it. This is the part most people never expect, because we have been taught that love, especially with someone older, means compromise of identity. But psychologically, the opposite occurs when the foundation is healthy. When a woman feels emotionally safe, her authentic self emerges. Safety is not control. Safety is not dependence. Safety is the absence of fear, fear of abandonment, fear of judgment, fear of instability. When those fears are quiet, a woman's true nature has room to surface. Her thoughts become clearer, her emotions become more honest, her desires become more defined. She no longer shapes herself to be accepted, she expresses herself to be understood. This is why she does not lose herself. In unstable relationships, women often fragment. One version for approval, one version for survival, one version hidden away to avoid conflict. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion and identity confusion, but with an emotionally grounded older man, fragmentation is no longer necessary. Consistency allows integration. She becomes whole. She begins to speak with confidence, not volume. She articulates her needs without guilt. She sets boundaries without apology. She is not afraid of disagreement because she knows disagreement does not equal abandonment. This alone changes how she experiences herself. Her self-trust deepens. She no longer second-guesses her intuition. She no longer gaslights her own feelings. When something feels off, she pays attention. When something feels right, she allows herself to enjoy it without fear. Emotional safety teaches her that she can rely on her inner compass. This discovery of self is not loud or dramatic. It is subtle, but it is powerful. She notices she is no longer emotionally reactive. She pauses before responding. She reflects instead of assuming. This does not mean she suppresses emotions, it means she understands them. Emotional literacy replaces emotional overwhelm. She also becomes more aligned with her values. She understands what matters to her and why. She stops living according to external expectations. She is no longer trying to be impressive. She is trying to be honest. Her decisions reflect this: who she spends time with, what she tolerates, what she prioritizes. This is self-discovery in its most mature form. Being with someone experienced accelerates this process because he does not compete with her identity. He does not feel threatened by her growth. He does not need her to be smaller so he can feel bigger. That absence of power struggle allows her to expand naturally. She becomes softer but not weaker. Softness returns when defense is no longer required. Vulnerability becomes possible when it is met with respect. She can express fear without being dismissed. She can express ambition without being diminished. She can express emotion without being labeled as too much. This balance is rare. She also becomes stronger but not hardened. Strength rooted in safety looks different from strength built through trauma. It is calm. It is steady. It does not need to prove itself. She knows her worth because she has experienced being valued, not because she has rehearsed affirmations. And here is a crucial insight. She does not become dependent on him for this version of herself. He did not give her an identity. He created an environment where she could access her own. That distinction matters because it means she carries this self-awareness forward regardless of the relationship's future. She understands that the relationship did not make her whole. It revealed her wholeness. This is why she is not afraid to stand alone if alignment is lost. Not because she is detached, but because she is anchored within herself. Self-discovery builds resilience. She knows who she is. She knows what she needs. She knows what she will not accept. This self-knowledge changes how she loves. She loves freely, not anxiously. She commits consciously, not impulsively. She does not abandon herself to maintain connection. She understands that real intimacy does not require self-erasure. Philosophically, this is the difference between attachment and union. Attachment says, I need you to feel complete. Union says, I choose you because I am complete. When a woman discovers herself through a healthy connection, she no longer seeks to be rescued. She seeks partnership. She does not romanticize suffering. She values peace. She understands that love should expand her life, not consume it. This discovery also changes her relationship with time. She is no longer in a hurry. She trusts the process. She understands that meaningful things develop slowly. She is present rather than impatient. This presence allows her to enjoy connection without clinging to outcomes. She becomes emotionally sovereign. Her happiness is no longer outsourced. Her identity is no longer negotiable. She can be deeply connected without being emotionally entangled. This is not detachment. This is integration. People often misread this version of her. They may say she has become distant, unavailable, less expressive. What they are actually seeing is a woman who is no longer leaking energy. She is contained, she is centered, she is intentional, and this is the most magnetic version of a woman, not because she is trying to attract, but because she is aligned. Alignment creates presence, presence creates depth, depth creates connection. She no longer fears being alone because she enjoys her own company. She no longer fears loss because she trusts herself to rebuild. She no longer fears judgment because she is clear about who she is. Self-discovery brings freedom, freedom to love without losing, freedom to commit without fear, freedom to walk away without collapse. And that freedom is what makes love healthy rather than consuming. So when you see a woman grounded, selective, calm, and deeply present, do not assume she has given herself away. Look closer. She has likely found herself. Because the right connection does not ask you to disappear. It gives you the safety to arrive fully as you are. And if love helps you become more yourself, not less, then you are not changing for someone else. You are finally becoming who you were meant to be.